right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, yWhales. Thank you for joining us. We have a very, very special guest again today. We have Scoopy Trooples from Alchemix on the line. But first, we've got Mr. Stefan Goss. What's cooking today, sir?
Super excited for this one. So Scoopy is definitely one of the kind of pioneers of DeFi 2.0. So very, very excited to have him on and learn more and kind of get some extra insights as to what their go-forward strategy is, especially with Alchemix 2.0.
Let's start off with the obvious. You are anonymous. You live, based on your code and the history of your work. What got you into crypto?
Well, I don't know. I've had a little curiosity for Bitcoin from like early on. I read about the Silk Road. I think it was back in 2011 or 12. And I was really close to buying Bitcoin at the time. But then I thought, I don't want to be on some NSA watch list for doing these things. And right before I bought like Bitcoin for like $1, like less than $1, I chickened out. And then, a few years later, I hear it crash. I'm like, okay, I'm all right. It crashed. Bitcoin's dead. And then it was like 2016, I ended up getting a little like chunk of money. And I decided, to start looking into investments, and I was thinking of different tech stocks, but then I was like, oh, what about this cryptocurrency thing? How's Bitcoin doing? I'm like, oh, it's not dead. It seems to be going back up again. And so, I got in at, 2016, and then, 2017, all the ICOs happened, got into Ethereum at that time. And then started playing around with dApps eventually with like CryptoKitties. And like there was some like early on like money games like FOMO 3D. I don't know if you guys ever played that back in the day. It was like this Ponzi lottery game. You would buy like a ticket, and if you're the last person who bought a ticket, then you would get the jackpot. But every ticket you bought would extend the timer by like 30 seconds. So people just kept on buying tickets and extended the game for a number of weeks or a couple months until somebody finally won.
That's amazing. I love the creativity of the space. When you can do things like that and just, dream, and we don't have to, if you don't have to worry about the SEC, for the most part in the blockchain world, we all have to worry about them. But, for people that can do that, it's amazing.
But so at that time, like I started playing around with these things. I was like, wow, this is really cool. You can do a lot of stuff with like, programmable money. And at that time I decided, like I want to be a blockchain developer. I want to make things. And, at the time, like Uniswap was just being built. MakerDAO was just being built, things like that. So I didn't know it would become like it is now at that time, but I wanted to be a part of it. So I, started to learn how to code at that time.
So you learned specifically how to code for Alchemix. Was that your first project, or was Alchemix always the dream? Or
it kind of just happened. Like I've been learning web development for like a solid 2 years, and over the course of those years, I'd met different friends in different Discords and like kind of formed bonds with them, and we had like kind of played around with lots of different like ideas to build stuff, and we made a lot of plans and designs, but never made anything. And then one time, one of my friends said like, hey, I have these contracts ready for this cool dApp I want to make. I need somebody to make the front end for it. And I was like, okay. And that was the early origins of Alchemix.
So on the, I'm just kind of playing around with a little bit of how you got into it, because we're going to spend quite a bit of time on Alchemix. What was the kind of early use case that you just go, this is missing? This is somebody that's maybe slightly in the space, but you felt that you could do it better or had a different vision. What was kind of the early predecessors of Alchemix?
Well, I think like the earliest things that people were doing is like stablecoin farming. Back when like Compound V1 was around, when Aave first launched, when there was like idle finance, things like that. Like on-chain yields were like the multi-collateral DAI rate, it was like 5%, 6%, and people were really happy with it. Then when Andre came around, he had his I tokens, and they would, like rebase around between, the different the different interest markets at the time. Then that turned into those curve tokens, and then it just started blossoming and blooming from there, and all sorts of different things grew out of it. And I think when like the Yearn vaults came to fruition is when the light bulb moment went off and how powerful yield derivatives could be. And so like at that time we had this plan. It was like the early prototype of Alchemix it wasn't like a stable coin. It was like just a meta yield coin, where basically you would deposit stable coins, lock them up for a certain amount of days. And then the yield earned on those ones going into Yearn would then buy this this token off the market. And when you lock up your tokens, you would get this token, right? So like I say, I'm going to lock up 100 DAI for 100 days, and then you get this token right away. But then the interest earned from that would be then like paid to buy this off the market. But we found lots of problems with that. One of them being MEV. I don't know if you guys know about MEV, Miner Extractable Value. And basically, sandwich attacks can happen. So somebody can jump in front of your transaction and after your transaction. So if you're about to buy a bunch of tokens, they can buy right before you and sell right after you and make money doing that. Yes. So it would steal profit from like the users of the system.
Oh no, I'm just saying that's actually a super smart attack. Like that's pretty, like, it's not great for you, but like that's still pretty awesome and pretty creative of like using that mechanism, especially if you're repurchasing supply at the end.
Yeah, there's actually like anti-sandwich attackers. So like they will front run the sandwich attacker and then sell right after the sandwich attacker buys. So it like basically takes away a lot of their arbitrage opportunity from the sandwich.
Wait, they're doing that.
I'm envisioning like a competing little teams here.
Are they doing that out of the goodness of their heart, or is that money making too? I'm assuming. So it's
money making. Yes,
that's hilarious.
They're stealing their profit.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm going to take it that the entire process of doing this, you have learned 3 PhDs worth of financial information on just the number of ways that people can attack a system like this.
Yeah, you have to think a lot about this, not just, the security aspect and from the code level, but also just from like a market and economic standpoint as well. How could people abuse this? How could people utilize this in ways that you didn't expect, or that's not designed for? That actually classically happened with ALUSD. We had this liquidate function built into the contracts. You can't be liquidated in our systems, but you can liquidate yourself. Let's say that you deposit, let's say you put in 1,000 DAI and you borrowed a 500 ALUSD, and then you got rugged with that 500 ALUSD, speculating on something. And then you say, oh, I want to get my collateral back. Well, you could actually pay your debt with your collateral. So you can liquidate yourself that way. So if I had 500 debt with 1,000 collateral, I could take 500 of my collateral and pay off my debt, and then withdraw the rest of my deposit.
So does it market purchase the LUSD basically with your collateral and then uses that to repay?
So basically what happens is that the system treats DAI and ALUSD the same. So you can repay your loan with DAI or ALUSD. If you repay with DAI, what happens is it goes to our transmuter module and acts as backing for the peg. Same with all interest payments that happen in the system. The basic flow of Alchemix is that so for our flagship product, I would say that's ALUSD. So you deposit DAI at the current moment, and then you can borrow ALUSD based off your DAI. And then your DAI goes into Yearn Finance, which is a yield aggregator, and it earns interest. Right now, I think it's around 6 or 7%. So what happens is that as your collateral is earning interest, those interest payments that it earns actually goes to paying off the debt that you have in the Alchemix system. So it's a self-repaying loan, effectively.
So let's, for our going to kind of walk through a really bad example of this and allow you to kind of just talk us through the system. And I think that will really help explain. And what I'd love is kind of the backstory of each of these as we're going through. Yeah. So I've got some ETH, I've got some a little bit of DAI, so we can absolutely play here and just kind of talk us through the system and what went into each of these facets here. And I'm just going to kind of follow along with you.
All right, so if you click on the Vault tab at the top of the page, all right, so this is sort of like the CDP system. So if you're familiar with MakerDAO, this is our CDP system for Alchemix.
What's CDP?
Collateralized debt position. So you have to put up collateral in the form of DAI in order to borrow ALUSD. So first step is that you would deposit DAI. Prompt MetaMask.
How are you feeling about all the gas fees lately?
I'm not too happy about it, even if I can't afford it. It's still like, even running Alchemix and the different operations we have to, it's pricey.
Yeah, no, it is. Have you thought about other platforms to sidechain or kind of take some load off this?
Yeah, we're definitely moving towards like L2s and sidechains. We just want to go forward with our V2 architecture instead of our current V1 architecture. So
you're going to
gotcha.
V2.
I'm
and
just
then,
waiting.
So I mean, obviously L2s make sense. Which sidechain or which other chains, I guess, are you looking at? Like, what's like? I don't know if you can tell already or not.
Right now, like kind of like the easiest chains for us to integrate would be Fantom and Polygon. Fantom because Yearn is over there, so integration with that would be a lot easier. And on Fantom, not Fantom, but Polygon rather, they have Yearn kind of spin-off called Tesseract. That's basically like a sanctioned Yearn fork over on Polygon that spun out of Yearn. So because of those, kind of high quality yield aggregators being there, they would be obvious first targets to go to. Also looking at Arbitrum, Avalanche, and other ones as well. So,
but the EVM based ones, are you looking at anything non-EVM?
Yes. We're looking at EVM based ones. Also looking at like the ZK rollups as well, the ones that can support EVM.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So I think also that like Solana has an EVM execution layer as well. So we'd have to be looking into that as well. So we're currently researching how to best make our tokens multi-chain compatible.
Awesome.
That's
and
awesome.
Rolling it out in a smart way. So yeah, it's best user experience for everybody across chains.
Fabulous. So we got our DAI in here. I've got my 5.5 APY. So, and it looks like I can borrow 400.
Yes. So if you go over to the borrow tab, so you can borrow, there you get the 100%, I'll give you the max you can borrow.
Okay.
All right.
So 100% of 50%.
Then you borrow ALUSD.
So far to again, I threw a small amount over here to play with it. So far to borrow the $400, I've spent $200 in ETH gas. But we all understand.
We're science.
We're bleeding edge tech here. So
this is gentrified territory.
We have been priced out. Unless you're an OG ETH maxi, you cannot afford.
We talk about this all day long, ETH versus Solana versus these side chains versus everything else. And so, we've launched a few very small projects, minuscule compared to Alchemix here. But it's always interesting to talk to developers like yourself. Like, how painful is this? Do you feel like you'd be doing better if gas was actually under control?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we hear a lot from people in our community on Twitter and Discord that they want us to be on this chain or that chain, this layer 2, and we hear them and we want to get over there, but we made a conscious decision not to take our V1 architecture over there because we have something that's that we think is a lot more powerful and a lot more scalable with our V2, which is going to be coming out in the next month or two.
Yeah. And by the way, the layout of your site and how this operates, even from a V1, the fact that you don't make me go hunt for these tokens and contracts, whatnot, was really a nice feature. So I appreciate that. All right. So we've got our 400 AIUSD, ALUSD. And so now, like I said, we can kind of, what else would you have someone do that people would want to play with on the site besides farming or any of that?
Okay. So if you go back to Vault, I'll still walk over the other thing. So as you're, click on the withdrawal tab.
Yep.
Yeah. So right now you can't withdraw anything. So available to withdraw is 0. But after you have some debt payments take place, like from the yield harvest, you'll start to be able to withdraw your DAI if you choose to. It doesn't make sense if you're going to withdraw 20 DAI and you have to spend $200, dollars a week to do.
We're laughing, but it's actually crying. So
yes,
we get it.
Sadness.
Hey, when you're saying debt payments, the debt is the 400 you just borrowed against the 800,
yes.
right? So you're basically,
yes.
But you're making interest on the 800 that gets applied to the 400, and that 400 is going to start decreasing over time. And therefore, you can withdraw if you choose to.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, your full 800 is earning.
Okay, so that's why it accelerates so fast.
Yeah, that's why like if you had the choice, like let's say you had your 800 DAI here and you had an expense come up in life, you could say, hey, I'm just going to spend 400 DAI right now to go ahead and pay for it. Or I could put in 800 DAI into Alchemix, borrow 400, use that to pay for, whatever thing that happened I need to pay for. And during that time, you'll have $800 worth of collateral earning you interest instead of $400. So that's the efficiency gain that Alchemix presents.
It's very interesting. And so who helped with kind of the economics around, all of this? Because some of it is traditional and some of it's very, nuanced.
Yeah. So when we were developing Alchemix from that early version I was describing earlier, and once we ran into like the MEV problem with the sandwich attacks, we went back to the drawing board. And at that time, our team was like 4 people. So 2 Solidity engineers, myself, who's like, I can do Solidity, but I'm more of a front-end developer. And we had one other kind of like jack of all trades developer on there as well. And we were just kind of going through lots of scenarios and simulations, models. And eventually we kind of landed on this Alchemix model. And it's like, once it kind of like dawned on me, like, oh, wow, this is actually a really cool idea. And like, we just ran with it from there. Yeah,
no, that's phenomenal.
Later is what we launched with. Yes.
Which is the new age. We don't care about what they did in the 1900s or the 1800s. Here, what are we going to do with this new age?
Okay, so for this stuff, just the tutorial over the site is repay. Sorry, so repay, you can pay with ALUSD or DAI or both. So if you click on the ALUSD thing, you can switch to DAI, or if you click on that plus icon to the right, you can do both.
Oh,
yeah. So,
that's really cool.
So you can repay that way, or the other way you can repay your loan is to liquidate it.
Oh wow! So if you just say, "I've already blown the money. I just want whatever's back."
Yeah,
I can still pull my. Interesting.
Yep. And if you liquidate that, it'll give you a warning message and saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
So basically, if you liquidate now, it doesn't really matter as long as you still have the ALUSD. You didn't really lose anything, right? So it's efficient in the sense you didn't lose anything except for gas fees, obviously. But so then it's only if you've wasted the ALUSD that your 1,000 or 800 DAI has now turned into 399.99 DAI because you've spent the other 400 granted.
Right. Yeah. That's just some like long digits and rounding errors because, smart contract things there. 18.
I'm gonna make a T-shirt saying "smart contract things" because that's very true staying.
So once you have your ALUSD, you can swap it on Curve. You can to get another stable coin, or you can swap it on like a kind of like DEX aggregators like Zapper or Paraswap. And what they'll do is they'll like route it through various DEXs to get whatever token that you basically want to get. So it's easy to trade. And then the next one is the transmute her. So it says transmute ALUSD to DAI. So if you go to the Curve market and you notice that like the price of ALUSD relative to DAI or USDC or Tether is not suitable, is not acceptable for you. Let's say it's like at 98 cents on the dollar, right? It's not that right now. Right now it's pretty tightly pegged. It's like 0.9993 DAI per ALUSD. So essentially one.
Yep.
But if the peg was not to your liking there, you can deposit your ALUSD in the transmuter module. So if you go back to the Alchemix page, and this is like, this will swap your ALUSD over to DAI slowly over time, based on the incoming interest payments coming into the system. So right now that's estimated to be about $142,000 a day coming in interest payments. And so that's, basically the amount that could be transmuted in a day.
Oh, okay. And this is your backup plan in case it depegs.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if people, think that the peg isn't doing well on the markets, they can then redeem ALUSD 1-to-1 for DAI.
Just over time.
You
okay.
See on the bottom, the global transmuter status is that there is 189 million DAI available for transmutation. So that means that there's like a giant backstop of.
How much ALUSD is out there?
There is there's a little bit over 300 million ALUSD out there.
So it's actually super well backed then.
Yeah, it's extremely well backed. It has very liquid market on Curve, but in addition to that, there's there's a lot of over collateralized positions, and also 189 million DAI in the transmuter model.
Let's jumping through the platform. We can see that you have really thought out not just the flow of how to borrow, but what you've done on repayment and be able to utilize the ALUSD is really a lot of thinking went into this. And so you were talking a minute ago, so talk to us a little bit about your team and what it takes what two is taken into play.
I guess for version 1, we had the original, we want to get advanced on your yields. And that was the original concept that we had. And that changed from our original version. That was more of the market-based one with the yield token, and turned into Alchemix, turned into a synthetic stablecoin platform. That took a lot of iteration, which was data-driven based off of lots and lots and lots of modeling. We're talking writing programs, doing lots of spreadsheets and just looking at the models, trying to map out lots of different scenarios for what could happen to try to look for vulnerabilities in the design, where people could exploit it, things like that. And doing that again and again and again, and refining it, getting to a new version that takes into consideration some of the shortfalls of the other one, and then building another version because that one has problems in it as well. That's kind of the process that our team works with, is just very iterative. We start with a vision, something that we want, and we start building towards that, and then we run into a problem and we try to solve it, and we come up with solutions, and that's just sort of our development process. And it's been like that from V1 to V. Although we did improve our process quite a bit, we've been working with an auditing firm called Runtime Verification. They're one of the premier auditing firms, just in general, not just in blockchain, but in general. And they help to do like a verification of our V2 design. As we were developing it, we worked with them for 2 months as we were iterating on our version 2. And so once we got to a place that we were really happy with them, we went full steam ahead in developing the spec that we worked together with them to make.
Hey, I'm actually curious, the product vision change, because it sounds like you kind of started with something completely different, and like talk about the audience and like what are the use cases that you saw in the beginning, and then how those kind of, it seemed like the actual use case kind of changed over time. So I'd love to like know, like, what do you see people using it for? What were they? And then what do you think V2 gives them extra on that?
Well, there's people who use it for all sorts of different things. A lot of people use ALUSD for, farming, it's because that's the state of DeFi in a lot of ways, is what they'll borrow ALUSD or they'll buy ALUSD, and they will deposit liquidity into Curve or Saddle. And then they will deposit those LP tokens to farm and earn interest in various places. So that's one source of demand for people holding a lot of these tokens. But for people who, like for other people, they're actually using it to finance their lives. Since like Alchemix, you can kind of spend and save at the same time. I know that there was a guy who bought his dad a boat. His dad's boat got wrecked in a hurricane a number of years back, and he took out an ALUSD loan, swapped it for USDC, which drew it from Coinbase, and bought his dad a boat. And that boat's being repaid in Alchemix right now. There's a person who bought a car. Somebody paid for their college grad school tuition. Somebody paid for their the medical fees for their son's birth. Like, so I've heard lots of stories of people coming out and telling me how they've used, the actual product.
And the cool part with that ends up being, so I can put in $100,000 of collateral and DAI. I can borrow against that, buy a boat, and then over time, the loan gets repaid. And in the end, I get my $100,000 back. So instead of having actually, quote unquote, paid for the car, it's just the interest. It's kind of the opposite of a usual loan where you borrow money and then you pay back more. In this case, like you borrow money against, granted it's collateralized, obviously, but you borrow money against collateral, and then that lets you spend the money, but in the end you get your money back that you at least collateralized. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's a self-paying boat right there.
Self-paying boat.
So what's the what's the max? Is there a maximum, or what's the largest loan someone's done?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know that we've had a number of like pretty large whales in the system. I think maybe the biggest loan out there is 5 or 6 million ALUSD, might be more.
Wow.
Yeah, I think one of the people in the farming pool has a position of something like $43 million worth of liquidity they're supplying. So that might be the sole largest like holder of ALUSD, because that would be like half ALUSD, half of like these 3 Curve tokens that they're paired with.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dive into the question, and I'm going to start with so talk to me about Tether, and then let's compare it to ALUSD. What's your feelings on Tether today?
Tether is just another one of the centralized stable coins that put it at about the same level as USDC. As far as being backed, they claim to have 100% reserves. I don't believe it, but also the same thing with, I think they're doing fractional reserve stuff, where they say they have all this money, but they're really just lending it out and different things like that at the same time. And I think, I know that the Paxos standard stable coins do not operate in this way. They have 100% reserves in fiat. They have FDIC insurance, all sorts of like really, really good stuff. Very transparent. They have attestations that are released, very regularly. Those are the good ones. Ironically,
yeah.
USD is a good one, better than, USDC or Tether. Really, all of the centralized stable coins are, they have a blacklist function on them. So they can censor people, they can censor protocols. So this is a big risk for using the centralized stablecoins, especially if you're like out in DeFi.
But just
I've
for
never
redemption
heard
with
about
them.
that before.
Yeah, but just for redemption, right? If you get blacklisted by USDC,
No, they will actually brick it. They'll brick it. You won't even be able to transfer them from your wallet.
really, they can brick it. Wait, how do they do
Do-
that?
Yeah, do you mind diving into that a little bit?
Blacklist. So there's a blacklist function on all the centralized stable coins, so USDC, Tether, Paxos, etc. And like they can blacklist an address. So if you're, let's say you just hacked a DeFi protocol and you're holding a bunch of Tether in your wallet. If the Tether team responds in time before you can transfer those tokens out of your wallet or mix them or whatever, right? Trade them to ETH and then tornado them, whatever. Before you can do that, you would have like the Tether team, if they're notified in time and they act in time, they could freeze the Tether in that account and not let you transfer it.
Wait, but how do they
And so it
control
would
the
just be
transfer though? I mean, it's on chain. Like
It's
how?
a smart contract. So
Oh,
a smart contract,
interesting.
they'll say add blacklist, add the address to the blacklist, and then boom. Then once it's in the blacklist, then the transfers will be disallowed.
I see. So
and
Tether,
that's Tether, USDC,
Yes.
and all this. Does DAI do that?
No.
Interesting. So now we know why you have DAI.
Decentralized stable coins do not do this. I do not know of any of them that do.
Yeah, can you actually dive into DAI and the difference between like a DAI and USDC? I mean, obviously you have a super good grasp on that, so I'd rather have you explain.
Yeah, so USDC is another centralized stable coin. It's made by Circle in a consortium with Coinbase. And they kind of originally market themselves as sort of like the cleaner alternative to Tether, because Tether had some taint to it with legal troubles and Tether truthers out there and stuff like that. A lot of people, worrying that it's not really backed and, asking questions about the founders. So there's a lot about Tether. But anyway, so it's kind of about marketed, as like a more, truthful or, cleaner Tether. And the thing is, like, while they are more transparent than Tether, they also state that, like, a certain amount is commercial paper. And it's like, wait, what is commercial paper, right? Like, so these very vague things that are on their attestation list. DAI is a stable coin that's backed by like a basket of assets. So like ETH is one of the major collaterals for DAI. USDC, ironically, is also a major collateral for DAI. But there's also a bunch of other things that are collateral for DAI, and it's a collateralized debt position. So you are over collateralized, and then you borrow based on the value of your tokens there, and you borrow a stable coin called DAI, which is collateral in Alchemix. And then if your collateral goes down in price to the point where it is under collateralized relative to how much debt you've taken out, then the system will sell your collateral to balance the debt. You'll liquidate you.
Can I ask, how does ALUSD compare to that? Like, I know it's a bit of a different use case, but I'd love to kind of see like what's it's closer to. Like, how do people have to think about it, just like mindset wise?
So with the MakerDAO, you're taking volatile asset and you're borrowing a stable asset. And if there's downward volatility, your borrowing position could be at risk. In Alchemix, you're taking a stable asset and you are borrowing a stable asset, or you're taking one asset and borrowing an asset that's mirrored off of it. So the debt and the collateral will be denominated the same way. The kind of the magic of this is that there's no liquidation. So if you borrow ALUSD, you're not going to be able to get liquidated versus like based off your position. Same thing if you borrow ALETH using ETH. So you can do that as well. You're not going to get liquidated from that, even if ETH goes up in price or down in price after you borrowed it. And it's a different use case. So with Alchemix, you're basically maximizing your savings while also being able to spend at the same time. That's kind of its use case.
Interesting, yeah.
And so you can rest easy. You don't have to manage, a degen position, right? You can, just borrow the money, use it for whatever you want to use it with, and then come back later.
So it really says something. It says something that you can take that step back, and I think there's because instead of having you're over here tracking a highly volatile asset that can move 30% in a single day, along with the fact that someone's just borrowing it. So it seems like you've focused kind of more on a general consumer in the long run, than us degens that, we've just got spreadsheets and alerts, popping up on our screen every 20 seconds.
Well, you can degen with Alchemix too. Let's say you borrow, ALUSD, then you could, go and degen with that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about we don't have to jump
Binance.
into your platform.
Yeah, go leverage 20x on Binance, lose it all, but you're safe aping. So in a number of years, you'll get that all back.
And so, okay, so you've abstracted away the need to yield farm myself to some extent, right? So because I could just go to Yearn, put it into Yearn, but then I have to wait, obviously, right? And I'm going to accumulate the money, and then I can be able to take it out. But you were basically prepaying, giving me some sort of like an NPV. Well, I guess it's not an NPV, but you're just prepaying me, and then over time, like I repay versus kind of the other way around versus depositing and earning over time. So you're kind of drawing the payout period way forward.
Yeah, think of it as like as an advance on your yield. So you calculate, I'm going to get this amount of yield. Since it's variable yield rate, the repayment time is variable as well. But you say like I can get this much up to this much yield in advance, and then you wait for it to be repaid, or you can repay it yourself early.
Okay, so basically so it's highly dependent. What happens if the yield changes? So it's just the timing changes basically, but I'm fine besides that?
Yeah, it would just take longer to repay. If the yield goes down, it'd be faster to repay if the yield goes up.
How long do the loans usually take to repay at current yields?
So the current yields, if they're a little bit low right now, I don't know what's going on with Yearn. Their rates are usually a lot better. But I think they're 5.6%. And if you take a max loan, which is 50%, it's going to be about 9 years to do repayment of a max loan. That's at the current moment.
Okay, cool.
So what else did you were kind of the big learnings building, because our group is more business focused. So we have a lot of startups, we don't, clearly there's a lot of gambling and whatnot, kind of the DeFi, normal DeFi degen stuff, but a lot of us are building companies in and around the blockchain space. What were some of the kind of things that shocked you coming from wherever you were in your previous life to the blockchain world, such as working remotely, working anonymously, and what kind of tools do you use to be able to manage a global 24/7 infrastructure?
I mean, I think, I don't know. I like the blockchain industry a lot more than what I was doing before the blockchain industry or joining it. Like the people are really nice. They're really helpful. No matter how much like Twitter drama and beef you see out there, like really like, in the Telegrams and Discord chats, with all these people, they're really nice and they're really helpful. A lot of people from the crypto community helped me, from like with Alchemix before we launched, just volunteered as you say, can you check this out? And people did code review for us. They looked at us, poked holes in it, helped us improve it, helped spread word once we came out, lots of stuff like that, just from people I've met and talked to in the space since getting into it and getting active and involved. And I think that's the thing I like best about it is the people. It's a joy to work in crypto. Yeah, of course, it's tough. It's one of those 24/7 kind of jobs where, you try to put your phone away, you try to put your computer away, but you get sucked into it really easily, which is a good thing. It's a blessing and a curse, though.
Listen, my wife commiserates with that because it's just like, you open your phone and the next thing you know, you're on a call and she's like, yeah. But it's and there's big things that are always happening around the world.
Lots of calendar apps, Discord, Twitter, Telegram, just trying to stay on top of communications and talking to people because it's mostly remote. Our team does a few syncs every week where we meet in voice, big team weekly meeting, and then like we have breakout sessions every week so we can keep our communications up and stuff like that. So
actually, question on that. Does the team know who you guys are in real life, or is like everyone even like internally anonymous?
We're internally anonymous, but we've known each other for years before starting in Alchemix.
Oh, that's super cool. So no one inside of Alchemix knows your name actually either, and you don't know any of theirs.
It might have like slipped here or there, but like people might have someone's first name or something like that, but that might be it. Like, because they got sloppy with their OPSEC for a second here and there, but that's about it.
Wow, that's
I've
really
purposely
interesting.
forgotten their names.
That's got to be a crazy
so-
dynamic inside of a team if you don't actually like, if it's just pure, like I kind of figured like you maybe get together once a year or something, but so no, it's just full 100% remote, like no chance at all.
Yeah, but we talk to each other a lot. And we've known each other for a long time. And we were friends before we started Alchemix. At least the core founding members are like that.
Did you guys come from?
Like,
did you come from a game?
Astronaut, they know what they're gonna say like next, and like they can anticipate their needs and everything like that. Like before they go on a mission, right? It's kind of like that. Like with our team, it's like we've known each other for so long. Like we work well together because of that.
That's super cool.
Did you guys come from a game, or did you just come from coding?
I came from something completely not related to coding.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so we've heard some teams, they started up, they were a gaming guild or something, and then they turned it into a business. So what tools do you guys use? And this is, kind of a personal question. How do you guys keep organized with you're completely anonymous, you're online only? How do you guys, what's your standard communication model for, keeping code and projects organized?
Yeah, we use GitHub, for like doing our code stuff. All of our repositories and all of our code is in there. For meetings and plans, documents, I use a combination of Google Docs and Confluence. So like Atlassian stuff,
Yep.
Because some people on our team came from, like kind of like professional world coding and stuff like that. And those are the tool suites that they used. So it's like, all right, we'll use those, fine. I prefer the Google Docs myself, but yes, I definitely repost them there too. We use like Hardhat, which is an Ethereum tooling, like command line, like kind of tooling suite. It's used to deploy contracts, run scripts, so we can get data off the blockchain that we need. Various functions that's used for. We use Gnosis Safe as a multi-sig infrastructure. Highly recommend that one. It's a very good app. So we run a Chainlink Keeper bot as well.
Oh, really?
Which, it just eats up a bunch of link as it's, doing the transactions to the harvest and all those things, because the gas fees on Ethereum.
Yeah, it keeps coming up over and over. In your development community, which again is I'm sure you probably have a small tight group that you work with. I mean, what is the, is ETH2 going to solve your problems, or do you feel like you have to migrate and hedge your bets on being multi-chain?
I think roll-ups are going to be really big in ETH2. I don't think ETH2 just by itself is going to fix anything. Just because, like, even if the block space does get increased, the block times are a little bit faster, and the TPS goes up, a certain amount, that block space is going to get eaten up immediately. I mean, even if you're looking at like Avalanche, who had like super cheap fees up until yesterday when they started getting to be like $20, $30 in some places. And like the whole thing was like, Ethereum's bad because people can't afford to use it. But it's like, yeah, because, people are using it. And as soon as another chain starts getting used, it's going to get expensive, just like Ethereum would be, So
it's just expensive right now.
Well, I mean, it's just sort of blockchains become victims of their own success because, there's a trilemma for scaling. It's, decentralization, security, and what's the other one?
Speed, I think.
Performance, decentralization, performance. And like something like a Solana, they sacrifice some in the decentralization to then kind of like maximize performance, right? And they might also sacrifice some in the security mindset as well. Same with a lot of these side chains. Whereas ETH maximizes for decentralization and security, but not for performance, right? So it's sort of like, what do you value? And it's sort of like, it's whatever you value. Like if you value cheap transactions, you're going to go to a side chain that with cheap transactions. And, if you value, security or liquidity, you're going to choose ETH or maybe Avalanche now, or, another chain. I think that's just how it's going to play out.
So jumping back into Alchemix, in version 1 and obviously take us into version 2, what have you thought about to partner with any, how do you market to traditional finance? Because your offerings to be able to buy a home, buy a car or do any kind of home equity, anything, is so revolutionary. Obviously the only thing you're missing is the fiat on and off ramp. So have you, what's kind of the vision for the next couple of years of Alchemix?
Yeah, so going forward with Alchemix, we're working on our V2. It's under audit right now, and once it's cleared audit, we're going to release that. It has a number of upgrades versus our version 1. Most notably, that Alchemix version 2 is going to be multi-collateral and multi-strategy. So what this means is right now, Alchemix is single collateral, single strategy. So the only collateral is DAI and the only strategy is Yearn. And V2, it's going to open up that completely. So you're going to be able to put in DAI, of course, but also other stable coins, like USDC, like maybe Tether as well, but also other decentralized stable coins, like a LUSD, like MIM, like a Frax. Things like that. They will also be able to be collateral in Alchemix V2. And then right now, there's only Yearn as the yield provider. In version 2, we're going to launch with Yearn as our yield provider, but we're going to expand out and add more and more and more over time. So that's going to be things like Compound, Aave, other yield aggregators on Ethereum, and side chains as we start to expand out to them as well. And like Rary Fuse. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rary Fuse, but that's a product I'm very excited about, a team I'm very excited about. So
what do they do?
Their first product was like a yield aggregator, sort of like a Yearn type of thing. But their second product is they made like a factory contract for Compound. Spin up their own instance of a Compound. And they can add whatever collateral tokens, whatever borrowable assets that they want to, and make their own lending market permissionlessly.
That's amazing.
At all the parameters you want to, interest rate models, collateral ratios, everything. So you can basically own your own little compound and with a built-in UI and everything.
So instead of having to do your own fork, you can just...
Yeah, you can make your pool. You can make your instance. Yeah. So this is a huge tool for protocols, for whales, for people who, for DeFi builders, lots of stuff that you can do with it. It's good for users in a lot of ways too, because collateral assets that might not make it onto, Aaves or Compounds can be used over there. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Olympus DAO.
Yes, and every 1,000 fork that rolls out every 3 days.
Yes, yes. How can you not know what it is at this point? Yes, but they got their wrap staked ohm, so like the ohm that like auto compounds on itself as a collateral in Rary Fuse.
Okay.
So then people were then borrowing, whatever stable coin they could get to then buy more ohm and leverage it. And so like every single stable coin in that Rary pool is earning like 20% or more interest because these, the degens over at Ohm or Olympus DAO, like just, want to borrow so much. If they're making 7,000%, right? Like who cares if they have to pay 40% interest?
Oh, interesting. So they collateralize it, borrow wrapped Ohm, and then just get
they use that as collateral to borrow DAI or
and then buy more Ohm.
And then they buy more. You can't actually borrow Ohm. you can only use it as collateral, because if they realized if people could borrow it, then they could borrow it to short it. So they made it so it wasn't borrowable.
That sounds pretty degen right there, though.
It's pretty degen.
So you did lie about Alchemix being used for fund usage.
Back to V2. So yeah, it's going to be multi-collateral, multi-strategy. So basically, you'll be able to make your own yield aggregator inside of Alchemix. You can
I love
put
that
a portfolio of whatever stable coins you want in there and hook them up in whatever proportion to any strategy that's available to them. You know, so if let's say there's 5 DAI strategies, you could split your DAI 5 ways, you know, in any proportion that you want amongst those strategies. The cool thing about this is, though, let's say if one of these protocols that you're hooking into to get yield suffers like a black swan event, like a negative loss, it's only going to affect those tokens that are hooked into that strategy. The rest of the system will remain unaffected. So it really segments and separates risk, even having this flexible architecture.
Interesting.
So it puts the onus on users a little bit to select their yield strategy, right?
So in a scenario like that,
so if they want to go into like, you know, something that's higher yield, but it could be higher risk, then that's a choice they would make. Versus a more conservative thing like a compound or Aave. So less moving parts.
What's the benefit? Okay, I get you can advance the yield, but is there a whole separate benefit of just like depositing all my collateral into Alchemix and then have you guys do effectively yield farming for me through the Yearn strategies? Or am I better off in that scenario just going with Yearn?
Actually, in Alchemix, you're probably going to be better off than going to Yearn. For the main reason is that I was about to talk about this earlier, but in our transmitter, when we were doing the demo, we saw that you had 189 million DAI that was backstopping ALUSD. That's actually in Yearn, and that's earning interest for Alchemix. And then the interest that earns actually goes towards faster debt repayments. All of it goes towards that. So it boosts the interest rate that we have. So you saw that we have like 5.6%. Yearn is probably at like 4%.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you're picking up some extra contract risk.
Principal.
But okay.
Yeah. Because our principal is larger, we effectively have a higher interest rate for our users.
How does the protocol make money? I mean, does Alchemix take like a cut on fees? How does that work?
Yes. 10% cut on harvest fees. So if we do a harvest for $100,000 of yield, we would take 10,000 of that, and the users would get 90,000.
And when you say we, it goes to the team or it goes to the token?
It goes to the DAO treasury.
Okay, cool. Yes. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Which would then, if it wants to be used by the team for different operations, would go through a governance proposal in order to get that authorization to use that money for the team, you know, funding.
How giant is the DAO at this point? It must have done really well recently.
We're going to be launching, so Ethereum would be like something like an ST ETH, or different kind of maybe SETH, like from synthetics, other ETH, 2 liquid staking tokens like Rocket ETH and things
like a Lido,
Those would be collaterals for Al ETH. We're going to be working on making an Al BTC and probably working with Badger DAO to get some different sources of yield for that. Because they're basically like the Yearn for BTC for DeFi. That's Badger DAO, if you didn't know that. We want to actually look into doing something like the Alchemix, you know, altcoins, DeFi, other DeFi coins that we could make Al tokens for, just like we have ALUSD, Al ETH, there'll be Al BTC, you know, something like you know, just for example, you know, there's no commitment to this at this point, like an Al Sushi, right? So Sushi has their X Sushi staking token, right? So the trading fees and the different fees, protocol fees, go towards buying sushi, which then gets staked into X Sushi. So it just kind of auto compounds on itself. And so you deposit your sushi to get X Sushi, and then X Sushi just auto compounds. So basically what we could do is somebody could deposit sushi or X Sushi into Alchemix. then they could mint ALUSD, right? And then the profit from the XSUSHI could, then pay off their ALUSD loan.
Okay, and again, because you're borrowing the same thing that you're collateralizing with, you end up with no currency or liquid. I mean, you have the same underlying currency risk, I guess, but you end up with no incremental liquidation risks or anything like that. So your core risk is just contract risk in case anything goes wrong along the line.
Yeah, I would imagine Sushi DAO would really much like that product as well.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. You kind of end up being a really interesting product for the DAOs themselves because suddenly they have a way of actually generating yield on their own thing much more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, for altcoins like that, if we do like Alchemix and stuff like that, then that would be something the DAO would really like for themselves for sure. But also, I think that like Alchemix V2 is going to be a really good tool for DAOs to use just in and of themselves. Like, are you guys familiar with something like a Moloch DAO?
I don't know that one.
Okay, so Moloch DAO is one of the early DAO contracts that came out like a few years ago. And the basic idea is that you get a bunch of people, maybe let's say a dozen people, and they all pool money together. Based on how much they individually contribute, they get like a token in this DAO. And then this DAO will then use this funding to pay for grants for proposals, like research things or projects to work on. And then slowly over time, the money that people pool together will, eventually run up. Because they've done their mission unless they ask for more from the members and stuff like that. So what I was thinking of is, what if there was a Moloch DAO that plugged into Alchemix? They could borrow ALUSD off of like their their funds that they have, and then that would regenerate over time. And so they could prolong their funding.
And it avoids any sell pressure on the token too, because usually that's one of the main problems, right? When they spend money, the token then ends up dumping because either they give it away and whoever gets it sells it, so this would totally avoid that because you would stake it.
Moloch tokens aren't really used for speculation. It's just like a pure governance thing.
I mean, more like something like Sushi, right? If Sushi gives away their tokens for a grant, then somebody's going to probably sell that Sushi token. The token is going to like take a hit. Versus if they put it into Alchemix, you kind of avoid that sell pressure and you still get money to fund your operations, and then it repays itself.
Yeah.
That's super cool. That's super cool. No, seriously. I mean, that's pretty neat because just like for like L1s and like for the foundations, all those guys out there that have a ton of money sitting on the sidelines with their own token. Obviously, if they can just do this, that's so much of a better solution than like just selling the tokens. So that's super cool.
I think like just even DAO treasuries in general, like not just Moloch DAOs, but like if some DeFi app or some other app protocol has like $10 million in stable sitting around, right? Or that's like their operating budget, that they raise in their seed round or whatever. Stick that in Alchemix and extend your runway.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's and the fact, as this gains more popularity, and it does V2. Are you going to be tying into? You've got a lot of people that are tying into you. Are you kind of putting your protocol out there to be accessible through other protocols?
Yeah. So our version 1, we made a modifier in the contract that said no contracts allowed. So no, like basically smart contracts were not allowed to interact with version 1 because we were afraid of like, what could happen with flash loan attacks and things like that. Security, always is our number one concern. And that's why we chose that. In version 2, we don't have that. And we worked with runtime verification, like, really great auditor to ensure that we wouldn't need something like that our system is robust enough that it would be able to be protected against such attack vectors. And so because of that, V2 is going to be a lot more composable. So people can build on top of it. We can integrate it into other protocols can integrate us into them, and we can become like a Lego brick in and of itself, like in DeFi. And I think we are really well suited for that because the only fees that we take are on those harvest fees, like on those harvest actions. That's it. Like there's no, deposit fee, there's no withdrawal fee, there's no minting fee, no repaying fee. So people can fluidly move in and out. And because of that, it makes it very composable.
That's super cool. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, other than the Ethereum tax.
Yeah. And once we go to layer 2, which is something that we're going to be focusing on, in 2022, you guys can stop complaining about that.
We'll find something new to complain about.
Yeah, it's not going to help.
The latecomers are always going to complain about fees because once Avalanche, goes up 10x in market cap, their fees are going to be right in line with Ethereum's. But the Avalanche old money is not going to complain because they have such big bags that they can afford the fees. And then the new wave is going to be like, no, Avalanche doesn't care about its users. Let's go over to.
Well, the old users are going to be staking all their old tokens, and so they're the ones getting the fees. So yeah, I'm sure they're not going to complain.
Right.
Migration path for the pools that are already existing in V1, or does V1 stay and then there's just a V2?
So they're going to be alive at the same time, but we're after a certain period of time, we're going to activate sort of like our security mode for version 1, which will restrict people from depositing and minting in our version 1. So they'll still, be able, if they have money in there, they'll still be able to withdraw, they'll still be able to repay, liquidate their position and things like that. But we won't accept new deposits or minting from it. That'll come a little bit after V2 has been out. But since V1 doesn't allow for contract interactions, we can't build like a one-click migrator from V1 to V2. So people will have to migrate themselves over from V1 to V2. Yes. We're going to be launching on lots of side chains as well. They're not going to have to do that since we're going to be launching with V2 on the, the other chains. People can see the added utility and value of version 2, and they can, go over sooner than later. But we can't force them. It's blockchain.
Listen, it is, and people will get distracted by anything shiny that's in the floating in the waters here soon. Yeah. So pivoting off of Alchemix, you are heavily invested and heavily, kind of known around the blockchain world. What's some things that you're just excited about right now? Like what are the things that you're playing with or just find extremely interesting, in the blockchain crypto world?
I think to me, like the thing that's like most interesting going forward is kind of like the ETH2 in roll-up space. That I know, like, color shocking, but I'm kind of like an ETH maxi of sorts. I wouldn't call myself an ETH maxi, but I do align myself with ETH more than anything for sure. And I think the ZK rollups and the optimistic rollups are really, really, really powerful. They allow you to basically allow you to scale without sacrificing decentralization, especially when ETH2 comes online. When more shards are brought online, that's going to be extra data that the rollups can commit their data to. So it's going to add a data layer to Ethereum. So it's going to allow there to be rollups on rollups on rollups. There's going to be rollups all over the place. I mean, we already saw Arbitrum and Optimism launch their rollups, and then somebody forked Arbitrum and made Boba chain, right? And Boba's out there already. And they have their own token. So, people, the degens are going over to Boba, whereas Optimism and Arbitrum don't have their token, and fewer degens are there now because of it. And you're going to see more and more, rollups pop up, I think, on Ethereum, because that's, the most secure chain. So if you're paying $1 for a transaction, you're not really going to complain, right?
Today, are we going to start seeing a whole bunch of the L2s getting forked over to Avalanche now that everyone's complaining about Avalanche fees and people are just going to put tokens on top of that?
Maybe.
You'd think so, right? Fees are getting high.
Can handle the data.
Yeah, I don't know I know it's EVM compatible, but I'm not sure how hard of a port over it would end up being. But I'm sure whoever is the first L1 is going to raise a ton of money or do well. The first L2 on Avalanche.
I'm sure they'll probably do well as well. If I don't know the technicalities of Avalanche to know whether rollups are possible on it or not, but if they are, then I'm sure they'll do fine over there as well. But I'm really excited for the ZK rollups, especially more than the optimistic rollups, because they're not like or optimistic rollups are kind of like 100x improvement on scalability, whereas ZK rollups are like 1,000x improvement on scalability. They compress data really, 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 really tinily. So when they commit their transactions back to the mainnet, they can get a lot more TPS from ZK rollups. It's really impressive, and the fact that they're more secure than optimistic rollups, and they don't have a 7-day withdrawal time like optimistic rollups do. It's just like great for UX. You don't have to worry about bridging and all those things like that. People just move the tokens from one to the other, and it's easy.
Well, it's still a few hours, right? I thought it was like time frame of like hours. Like it's not super instant.
ZK rollups will be basically as long as it takes for the next commitment block to be Ethereum.
Okay, that makes sense. I thought it was
I think those are going to be around 10 minutes.
Oh, that's not bad at all. Cool.
Yeah. That's in line with most bridges. Cool bridging technology that's going to come out too. Like, we're already seeing really cool stuff with, like connects, any swaps, synapse, and things like that. You're going to see more and more cool stuff coming out too. So eventually it's, once one wallet maker finds a way to abstract all of these different accounts and things like that, then it's going to just come together and people aren't going to realize what chain they're on. They're just going to be using blockchain.
So that's the dream is the fact that we're no longer Prodigy, CompuServe, all the different systems that you had to dial into. Now it's quite simply, there's just that America Online moment where everything exists, and then we can kind of move forward from there. Who's closest to that, do you think?
Architecturally speaking, the Cosmos ecosystem, it's very promising as far as being able to make, a bunch of horizontal chains that interconnect with each other, but it sacrifices on security and decentralization to do so, because each chain on Cosmos needs its own set of validators. And it has, because of that, and I think Cosmos chains have like 100, maybe 200 validators. So that's less decentralization and less security because each chain has to be secured by a different token and different set of validators. ETH2, I think, call me biased, but I think it has the best shot of being kind of the end all be all of the chains. Because if, there's a lot of data that's available through these shards, and that gives rollups, a ton of room to commit to the blockchain too. So people are just going to be able to basically just use Ethereum mainnet as just a place to commit rollup transactions. And then rollups are going to be these like fast, cheap, really good UX options for the masses to use.
Interesting.
And I think that's good because you don't give up security, you don't give up decentralization, because ETH2 has already over 10,000 nodes and counting. You don't give up, scalability either, because you can extend these. If one rollup gets filled up, make another rollup, right?
but the rollups themselves are centralized, right? The rollups are fully centralized, at least at this point, right? Both Arbitrum and Optimism just remain completely centralized, right?
They're on their road to decentralization, is from what I understand, is how it's working. And a lot of things are already more or less decentralized.
Okay, cool.
Like the fraud proofs, like the important bits and stuff like that. I think I'm not sure if they have permissionless node operations at this point, and I know that the different blockchains or different rollups use different sequencers for how they include transactions. And I think there's varying levels of centralization in those. I know Arbitrum uses like a Chainlink one sequencer for including transactions, which has some of the MEV community angry because they can't execute MEV as easily because of it.
There's always someone upset with disclosures.
Ooh, that's actually a good topic switch. I'm super curious about your choice of anonymity. Like, is it because people just get mad at you? Is it more of a regulatory? And by the way, feel free to just not want to talk about that. But I'm just legitimately super curious.
I'm more shocked that there aren't more anonymous people out there in crypto. People, if you're in a Web2 company or whatever like that, you're rich, you have your shares in a clearinghouse or a brokerage firm and all your money is in the bank. Whereas you're in crypto, you got your stuff on your ledger, your Trezor, your hardware wallet, or, just some paper phrase in a box somewhere, right? Somebody could break in and if they know I'm the founder of Alchemix, they could find out where I live and then use a wrench to beat my seed phrase out of me, or my PIN number out of me and get my funds. And furthermore, they could target somebody in my family or something like that to get to me. And so that's one of the reasons why I want to be low key in crypto and sort of have separated from my real life identity, is to protect myself. Another thing is that like I'm secret to not just like my team members in the community, but like my family doesn't know what I'm doing either.
Oh, really?
What do they think? What do they think you do?
So, because my friends don't know either. So like, I just don't want people to treat me any differently, because they think I'm, some hotshot, founder or whatever. I'd rather just blend in and just be, who I was.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. So you truly, your online life is extremely different than your personal life, and you're just bounce back and forth.
I live a very simple life.
It's easy to do nowadays
Yes,
when the world's shut down.
Huh.
Now I have
any NFTs? Are you into any projects?
Not terribly. I mean, I dabble. I buy some here and there. I have a pudgy penguin. I got a few Loom Dart Wazies. Let's see. I've got a few Avastars. I had a loot bag, but I sold that. But I minted a bunch of like just this, those things you can mint with loot. I don't know if you guys follow them. It's just like
listen, we've got 700 people and on our Discord, and every NFT project that you can imagine is being they ape into it, and we actually have our own, which is why I'm asking, because I'd love to airdrop you one of our whales as a thank you for coming on our show. If you're able to put a wallet that you're okay, that everyone will know what this is, into the chat, I'll drop you a whale.
Yeah. I'll give you the address that I use for the Alchemix multi-sig. That's like my public address. Yes.
There you go. Well,
yes.
Ooh, that's a fancy address, too. That's exciting.
Everyone, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me on. If anybody listening wants to, learn more about Alchemix, I invite you guys to come to our Discord. Our community is very helpful, and they can help you guys get started and answer any of your questions.